Yeah, I feel like the only commonality was like, I feel everyone was just really trying to be original or trying to put a niche. Like, I could feel that, bro. Like, it was just like that hunger to just like be
different.
Today we are ranking nu metal albums from 2002, starting with Coal Chamber with Dark Days. Now, while this album was a disappointment to me back in the day, considering the lineup changes and that it signaled the end of the band at the time, in retrospect, it may just be their best album front to back. Fiend is a killer opener that never fails to get me banging my head and screaming along, and same goes for Something Told Me. Then you have Glow, Watershed, Dark Days, and even the Flood cover Rowboat is extremely fun. It also just feels like the perfect transition towards the sound of the Devil Driver debut that would come not long after. Honestly, easily one of the best nu metal albums of this year, because frankly, it's not the greatest year. It's especially coming off of 2000, 2001, which were pretty much unbeatable, if you ask me. But next up, we have Papa Roach with Love-Hate-Tragedy. Now talk about a 180 in tone from Infest. Gone are the dark, brooding, and maybe admittedly overly angsty elements in favor of something that just feels so bright and corny as a result with tracks like She Loves Me Not. They weren't even really nu metal at this point, it was just rock, and this was at a time where there were just still far better rock albums to go around, from Songs of the Deaf to Audioslave, and I'll say more on this later, but this was a time where a lot of bands were kind of going butt rock, which isn't even really an insult for me. I think it was a great time for radio. I love a lot of those butt rock bands, but I'm not going to include those here. Like, for instance, kind of honorable mentions, Dry Cell, Chevelle, whose album I absolutely love this year, 36 Crazy Fist, and of course, Trapped, whose album I do not care for. None of those are going to be on this list because I just consider them to be more rock albums. But Papa Roach still included because big name in the genre.
A little hypocritical, what'd you say?
Anyways, the other single, Time and Time Again, didn't do it for me either. It just kind of feels like a case of the band getting too big too fast, and the side effect of that can often be losing the angst and genuineness that got them there. This feels like a studio assembly line album to me, right from the opening David Lee Roth, yeah, of M80. But from a business standpoint, though, I get it. This was very much the way the wind was blowing in terms of what was doing well on the radio, and they sold 500,000 copies in the first 2 months, and it was certified gold, so what the hell do I know, right? But for me personally, in terms of enjoyment, it's just going to okay. Next up, we have Third Strike with Lost Angel. I have been waiting to include this album on any video on the channel, really, because it is so underrated, and unfortunately to the point that I often forget about it frequently, despite being a big fan of it. I had to add it to my Spotify list so that it's just constantly sitting there, so that anytime I open it, it was like a reminder of like, oh yeah, I need to make sure I don't forget to include that one. And this is the one and only album from this California band that mostly flew under the radar, but I guarantee listening to lead single No Light will inspire you to check it out, because it is a certified banger, and while the rest of the album never quite reaches the same level, it is consistently enjoyable and well worth a spin. I think it's one of the hidden gems of nu metal. I'd recommend this one about as much as 40 Below Summer I talked about. People asked on the previous list, what is that song? That sounds amazing. I hope that this is another one of those moments because this band slaps. I kind of wish they had gotten bigger than they did. So yeah, they're going to great tier, I would say. I wouldn't hype them up further than that, but it's worth your time. Then we have Skindred with Babylon. The debut album from this Welsh band, emphasizing elements of reggae in their music, and those rapid syncopated vocals really add a fresh flair that, in a decade already showing the decline of the genre, was a breath of fresh air. Some bangers on here too, like Nobody, Set It Off, and Bruises, that are extremely infectious, but unfortunately some of the more upbeat stuff just isn't as engaging to me. Still more points for feeling more unique and more enjoyable too, I would say, than a lot of other albums here, so overall, I would actually put this one at fantastic. I know I feel like I raved more about Third Strike than this one, so it almost feels like they should be reversed, but sometimes that happens. It's about the whole experience, though. Next up is Switched with Subject to Change. The debut full-length from this Cleveland band, and while so many were shedding a lot of their metal elements, these guys still seem to understand the assignment. There are some more rock-oriented moments here, but it's still got more than enough of the heavy groove and screaming to warrant being called nu metal, I would say. Now, is it amazing? Not really, but there's enough in here that some of these songs get me bobbing my head. Worth checking out, I would say, especially if you haven't before. Notably, Bradley Koschmidt, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, formerly of Nonpoint, plays guitar, and Chad, oh good lord, Chad Sesliga of Breaking Benjamin and Black Label Society provides drums on this album. I'm going to put it at good tier. Alright, back to bigger names. We have System of a Down with Steal This Album. Now, another one that's not without its high points, like Inner Vision, Boom, and IEAIAO, but really, this is a glorified B-sides album of leftovers from Toxicity. That is a fact. Like, they have even said that's basically what happened here. And I'd say it shows. 16 tracks that feel very much slapped together with no clear flow, and few of which are anywhere close to the same quality of their predecessor. But I get that is not necessarily a popular opinion. I know plenty of other people, especially in the fandom, that really love this album. I even know people who say it's their favorite, and that is fine. This is just my opinion. But as a huge System of a Down fan at the time, as these albums were coming out, I was really looking forward to this, and this ended up being another moment where I was really disappointed, and I kind of started to lose interest around this point. So give me the albums before this, definitely, like especially the self-titled and Toxicity, but also the albums after, I would say, are better. This is my least favorite System of a Down album. That said, it's still solid, and it's still better than a lot of the stuff on this list, so I will grant it great tier. Then we have Otep with Sevas Tra. Many of you may have caught my review of this band's latest covers album, and one that I called one of the worst albums I've ever heard, and I still stand by that. If you have not checked out that video, I highly encourage it, because I had a lot of fun making it. It almost made itself.
On Twitter, the news every day I am. I keep it hundo, and now I'm banned.
Imagine being 43 and thinking, oh yeah, that's fire. Now, if I were to recommend a single album, though, from this train wreck of a band, it would be this one, as I did enjoy it at the time, and it's not without its higher points. That said, going back to it now, a lot of the seeds for their later cringeworthy elements are already being sown here, right from the corny intro. Also, Otep's voice has always been whiny and annoying. She's got some good deeper growls here and there, but everything else is just so obnoxious, so it's not the worst thing, but it's not great either. I'm putting it at okay. We also have Taproot with Welcome. This one also stung a lot, as I consider Taproot to be one of the first bands that felt like I was in a small exclusive club enjoying. And again, coming off of a career high debut in Gift, I was like really pumped for this. But when they dropped Poem as the single, I was just not really into it. I know some people love that song, and it is one of their biggest singles, maybe their biggest. I'm just not enjoying it. Like, I don't care for it. I find it pretty annoying, and I didn't like the direction that they were going. It all just felt less dark and heavy, instead just more kind of tailored for general rock radio audiences. Again, that might have been like pushed by the studio on some level. Maybe I'm just speculating. Maybe it was just the band's decision. I don't know that for a fact, but it just further confirmed listening to the full album that it just wasn't really for me, and still isn't for me. Gift, I think, is just all you really need from this band personally. Listening to the new one, too, just kind of made me feel sad, because I love Gift. I think it is like the gem of nu metal in many ways, but I'm going to go ahead and put this one at good tier. I still think it's at least better than these. We have Mudvayne with The End of All Things to Come. This album is fine and easily second best to LD50, but to me, if LD50 is like a 9 or a 10 even, this is like kind of like an 8, maybe. It's a few steps down from that one, not even just one. Not Falling is really the only track I go back to regularly, and that one holds up to the promise of the debut, but nothing else quite does for me here. Just far less memorable songs, cheesier lyrics, and more streamlined songwriting, I think, was the most disappointing factor, because it doesn't have the more kind of technical aspects and experimental vision of the debut. Even World So Cold is just kind of okay as another single. Again, that said though, I think it's just better than a lot of stuff here. So it's going to Fantastic, which again, after that glowing review, may feel a little bit weird. But frankly, again, I just think 2002 was not an ideal year for this genre. We also have Disturbed with Believe. I get a lot of people saying that this is the album where they really got good, but honestly, I dislike this one even more than the much beloved debut, which is many hot takes there. I just think this is another supremely overrated album, and I remember what turned me off to begin with when it was coming out was the single Prayer and that kind of like Livin' La Vida Loca melody that's woven into there. Liberate and Remember are fine singles, but even those I won't remember in like 24 hours, and the deeper cuts are even more forgettable. Rise is also kind of okay. Even after years of re-listens, nothing really sticks with me in a particularly meaningful way. But that said, it's, again, still better than some of the listens on this list, but not many. I would put it at good tier. We also have Nonpoint with Development. Another one I really only include in name only, as there's virtually nothing nu metal about this one, but it is, again, one of the bigger names that's sort of important. Much like Papa Roach, they went into a much more rock-oriented direction, but even on that front, these songs just strike me as really bland and boring. Again, if you really want a good modern rock album from this year with a twinge of that old nu metal spirit, I would definitely go with Chevelles' Wonder What's Next. Fantastic record. I recall the next album from Nonpoint being a bit better, but we'll get to that when we get to that, if we get to that. But I'm going to put this one at okay. We also have Linkin Park with Reanimation. Now, I don't normally include remix albums, but this one is fairly important, I would say. And as far as those albums go, it is quite good. Lots of very strong and often interesting reimaginings of songs off of Hybrid Theory. Some are just a bit of a twist on the original, and others become almost unrecognizable, and all of them are really enjoyable. I also previously said I forgot that Stephen Richards of Taproot shows up on track 6 in addition to the many great hip-hop guests all over this record. Solid listen. I would put it at great tier. We also have Soulfly with 3.
Fighting for your soul, defending what is yours. I'm enough, I am.
Now, while this was another one that I was initially disappointed with at the time because I just was coming off of Soulfly and Primitive, and I think those albums are fantastic, and I don't think this one is as good. But it has grown on me over the years. Downstroy is a decent opener. Seek and Strike is a fine single. Last of the Mohicans and Call to Arms are pretty fun. Brazil appropriately leans back into the Portuguese and tribal elements, as do the various instrumentals at the end, though I think that these would have been better, more scattered throughout the runtime. The drumming in general consistently continues to be one of my favorite elements, and again, out of this year, I would put it at fantastic and pretty high up at that. We also have Downthesun with Downthesun. Another one-and-done band. This one formed originally in Kansas City, Missouri, and at one point signed to Slipknot's short-lived Maggot Core label. To my understanding, they're the only band that was ever signed to that label. I'd probably most closely compare their sound to American Head Charge, but not quite as heavy or consistently engaging. Still some fun enough head bob-inducing songs, though, like We All Die, I Confide, and the at times Static X-coded Enslaved, but then the occasional not-so-great moment, too, like Pitiful. Enjoyable enough. I would put this one at great tier. There's also 5.0 with Untitled. This band formed not far from my old stomping grounds in Joliet, Illinois, also a single album crew. Kind of feels, again, like American Head Charge, but crossbred with, like, Faith No More. Some good elements, and nothing bad here, but also pretty meandering and forgettable. About, like, halfway through the album, I was sort of losing some interest, but again, I'd say it's better than some here, so I would put this one at good. We also have Crazy Town with Darkhorse.
Feel there's something missing. Sometimes I hate that chaos surrounds me.
Now, Butterfly became such a meme that I didn't even realize this group had any other albums besides the debut at this point. Very little to say about this one either, as it also goes in a more modern rock direction, and the results are not at all interesting in any way or stretch. Even the single Drowning feels like a third-rate attempt at making a Linkin Park song. Not really worth your time if you ask me. Like, at least the debut has some meme-worthy elements, has some kind of like, yeah, this is fun even though I know it's stupid kind of elements to it, but I would frankly just say it's bad. Just a reminder, if you made it this far, to like the video or dislike it if you're like pissed off. I know nu metal fans get really up in arms sometimes, but it is what it is. And feel free to comment below your own rankings, because yours are just as valid as mine. Share where you agree, share where you disagree. But moving to our final album, it is of course Korn with Untouchables. Now, it wasn't until I put this list together and looked at it in its totality that I realized that 2002 was just kind of the year of disappointments for me, for many of my favorite nu metal bands coming off of, again, their career highs at the time. Like, the years prior to this were just like the golden era, and then this is where I started to kind of lose interest and move on to especially a lot of metalcore and melodic death metal, and then death metal and black metal and all that stuff down the line from there. But I guess it was kind of a necessary moment for my metal development, so to speak. But also albums that later, circling back to, I realized I enjoy them more than I gave them credit for at the time. Now, speaking of which, Issues continues to be one of my favorite albums, but this one, Untouchables, especially for all the hype and the production cost price tag, just fell short of my expectations. It's still in the upper tier of Korn's discography and easily one of their best on this relative list. It's also still part of the kind of like golden era Korn albums, I would say, and it's right after that quality really declined, and this is one that still maintained at least some of that stuff. I actually saw them on tour with this album, and it was one of my first concerts. I believe my first metal concert, come to think of it, at the, it was at the Allstate Arena, or it may still have been called the Rosemont Horizon. But anyways, usual solid singles here, including Here to Stay and Thoughtless, and it makes for a relatively consistent listen front to back. Also, just always fun to see Jesse from Breaking Bad in his early days in that music video. But yeah, I would say it's, of this year, one of the best, maybe the best. I actually kind of enjoy the Cold Chamber album a little bit more front to back, I think. But yeah, that is my 2002 list. Y'all check out this playlist for more rankings of nu metal albums by year, or this for your personal YouTube recommendation. Subscribe if you're new here. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.